Yo, what's poppin', Low Gang? For the first time ever on the second channel, today we're doing rants. They are on the Patreon if you are a $10 donor, and you can get one yourself if you so desire by donating $10 to my Patreon. We're stealing the Digibro rant idea wholesale and shamelessly. Today's rant comes from Karen-chan, who says, "So anyways, I'd love to know what you think about the recently announced anime adaptation for Frieren, especially regarding the completely insane cast for the staff members. I've seen people call it the comeback of Studio Madhouse. Would you agree?" And I feel like when people are talking about the insane cast of Frieren, I did have to do a little bit of research into it because I wasn't overly familiar with it. But even I knew just from a cursory glance and from the grapevine that the director for Frieren is Keiichiro Saito, if I'm getting that correctly. And he's the director of Bocchi the Rock. Everyone knows about Bocchi, recently released, and it's lauded specifically for its directing and how it transforms the source material. There are some other people on the project of the currently announced staff that we know about that, I checked out on ANN. We have Tomohiro Suzuki, who did the script for all of One Punch Man Season 1 and 7 episodes of it for Season 2, and I think, he was also the series composition. I have these all written down, by the way. I don't have these committed to memory. Reiko Nagasawa did character designer of Attack on Destiny, and a prolific animator. You got Yuichiro Fukushi, who did animation production on One Punch Man and Attack on Destiny, and Sunny Boy. So these are all, for the most part, Madhouse guys. They work on a lot of Madhouse shows, even if they are freelancers. I'm not 100% sure who's freelancer and who's in-house at Madhouse, but a lot of One Punch Man dudes, which is very exciting. Madhouse, most people agree that it's been on sort of a downward spiral as of late. Granted, I wasn't there for, if you're a really pretentious anime critic, you know Madhouse for their more art house days way back when. But I know them for the Ore Monogatari, No Game No Life, One Punch Man era around 2014 to 2016, I think. That sounds about right. So, yeah, I'm a normie. I'm a normie. And recently, of their more recent shows, I've seen one episode of Bibliophile Princess, and I dropped it because it's decent but kinda boring, and it doesn't look that good. Police in a Pod is boring, and I dropped it after one episode, and it looks ugly. Vampire Dies in No Time wasn't my thing. I saw one episode of Sunny Boy, and thought it was pretty good, and most people tend to like that. So, I guess what I'm getting at here with Sunny Boy is that one good show isn't necessarily going to revive a studio. It's more so, it has to do with the way the studio is run, because Madhouse, although I don't have any confirmation for this because I haven't looked too deeply into the studio, shows like Police in a Pod and Bibliophile Princess in particular smack of a rushed production, because neither of them look nearly as good as No Game No Life and Ore Monogatari. Meanwhile, those shows way back in the day are incredibly well directed and have incredibly unique color palettes. And if you go back to Ore Monogatari and No Game No Life, those shows were using these incredibly distinct palettes that you could, tell from a glance, oh, this show has something special going on visually. They were very smoothly animated. And Bibliophile and Police in a Pod, they both feel very stilted and stiff, and that's one of the hallmarks of a production that had very little time. And in the worst case scenarios, you have stuff like Tomazaki, which are literally unfinished upon release. And to counter that, and to get the studio back on track and making shows that people actually enjoy, you first of all have to get IPs that people really like, which Frieren is, so it's got that going for it. But you also need to fundamentally change how you go about making the productions. You don't want to rush them out. You want to make sure they're polished, way back in the olden days. and you want to get on talent as well. And that is something that Frieren does show a lot of promise in. Keiichiro Saito, obviously, just like having just done Bocchi, I'm sure a lot of people want to work with him again. You know, he can bring on talent from Bocchi, and people who saw Bocchi in the industry and who want to work in a production under Keiichiro as the director will go on to Frieren in order to, you know, work under a guy who they know is very creative and will spice the production up as well as he can. And so Frieren could be they could knock it out of the park and bring on a bunch of talent because of Keiichiro Saito. And assuming it does have the time to, be a polished production and isn't rushed out, I'm sure this production can pop really well, and it's a very beloved source material. And I'm sure, I at least have faith that it can be a pretty good production. But in terms of whether or not it will revitalize the studio, obviously one good show on its own, as we saw with Sunny Boy, isn't going to necessarily change the trajectory of a studio. It's more a matter of if Frieren goes exceptionally well and if it perhaps gets future seasons, will the higher-ups at Madhouse and will the people at whatever production company owns Madhouse realize that the way to go about things is to, put their all into IPs that are beloved and that have a lot of people willing to watch anime based off of them? And will they realize that, going about productions more slowly and carefully and making sure that creative people have the time to really make the production pop and getting good staff on board? And if Keiichiro Saito, through his connections, can get more staff who are willing to work at Madhouse and who, get affiliated with people who work in-house at that studio, will all of that combined start a chain reaction that begins to turn the tides of the studio. And really, that's up in the air. Obviously, I hope Frieren causes a change in the studio, because no one wants bad anime, and I, for one, although unfamiliar with the source material of Frieren, do have faith in it being at the very least good on a script level based on what friends have told me. I do hope the show does pop and does get treated well and does cause all the things that people hope it will. But it's a matter of time and whether or not Madhouse drops the ball in this production and whether or not they drop the ball in future productions, even if this one goes well. I hope I was at least semi-coherent for that. And yeah, thanks for donating to my Patreon. Once again, to everyone listening, you can get one of these by being one of my $10 patrons. Thank you, Karen Chen, and have a nice day.